Thank you very much for taking the time for our conversation today. As one of the major restructuring lawyers in Germany, you have probably experienced the immediate challenges of your clients day and night over the last 20 months. Today, let's focus on the longer-term impact of the current crisis. So, given the incredible disruption caused by COVID-19, how do you currently assess the economic landscape across Europe as recovery efforts continue?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Rainer, for inviting me. Pleasure being here. On the first question, where to start? Probably, let's take a step back. As of September 2020, I believe we all expected a huge wave of debt coming and triggering considerable insolvency proceedings. Actually, at least from what I understand from Germany and what I also understand from colleagues in other European countries, it turned out to be not as bad as expected. One thing is clear, GDP is down and not back to pre-crisis level after 2021. The euro area economy is rebounding, of course, as a result of the forceful response and the rollout of vaccines. After contracting by almost 7% in 2020, the forecasters expect annual real GDP in the euro area to exceed the pre-crisis level by next year. Reason for that? Well, massive liquidity, which has been made available on the basis of rescue schemes, especially for companies. State funding, KfW loans, state guarantees, etc. So fair to say that policies adopted or at least credibly announced by governments to date appear to have achieved an appropriate degree of fiscal support.
Do you think there's a longer-term iceberg ahead that businesses aren't doing enough to avoid at this moment?
Companies with a massively inflated balance sheet are the rule and not the exception anymore. And all necessary measures to adapt the business and to implement necessary transactions and necessary transition, that was, of course, put on hold during the COVID-19 times, which means investments, divestments, and focus on core assets or digitalization. These issues, they were simply not tackled. The situation is now even more challenging if you think about it. All these measures, they are still pending and they need to be implemented, but now with heavily inflated balance sheets and considerable debt burden on the corporates.
Given the new normal in many industries, companies have already started to work on further developing their business models. Some players, though, seem to believe in a 100% comeback to the old reality. This might be dangerous because in the meantime, debt levels have increased significantly. How can companies look to reduce this debt burden financially?
As of the beginning of 2021, in some member states, including Germany, so-called new pre-insolvency, out-of-insolvency restructuring schemes have been implemented, like the German Staruk, aiming at simplifying debt restructuring on a majority basis level. So this has just recently been implemented. At the same time, there is, as I said, as this all goes back to an EU directive, there is a certain competition now arising between different jurisdictions. The Dutch, they've introduced at the same time their WOHA, and the English scheme of arrangement is, of course, still quite interesting as a tool to restructure debt. Until now, what we see or what we can say is that these new proceedings, which have recently been introduced, that they are not really court-tested. That with the exception of the scheme of arrangement. Interestingly enough, the UK appears in this regard again as a front runner with a new super scheme, i.e. the so-called 26A rescue plan. And it has been used successfully for major international restructurings like Virgin Atlantic, Gate Group, or Pizza Express. So with that level of competition, we may see also a certain race to the bottom. The question is this politically actually the desired outcome?
Yeah, just to that point, it might be an interesting follow-up aspect. In 2008-9, during the financial crisis, the banking and capital market crisis came first. The crisis in the real economy came afterwards. Worst case, post-COVID, it could be the other way around.
And actually, Rainer, that triggers the follow-up question. What about these impacts from an operational perspective?
From an operational perspective, looking at the core business, I think 3 points are very important. The first is like to tap the opportunity to reach maximum efficiency levels. That means like taking cost out, increasing efficiency. Secondly, it's about optimizing the footprint, the manufacturing footprint, but also the overall footprint. And third, to strategically grow the business. When it comes to the overall corporate portfolio, we at AlixPartners think in two directions. First, carving out non-core businesses in order to free up resources, capital, and management attention, and to benefit from the very favorable transactional environment still there at the moment. And secondly, when it comes to sustainably negative businesses, to sunset them, what we call sunsetting, so ramping them down in a values and value-based approach. Like taking all that into account, while government lending support is likely to taper down soon, public debt levels have increased significantly. What consequences do you see for companies that they should consider as long-term effects to economy?
Yeah, that's a good one, Rainer. As you know, in Germany, public debt levels have increased to approximately 70% of the GDP in the first quarter of 2021. That means 10% above first quarter 2020. So compared to France with 118% of GDP, Italy 160, or Greece 209, the German levels are still rather moderate. But Germany is definitely not alone in the Eurozone. And with the euro as one common currency, the situation is quite different when compared to the US. So again, interesting question will be actually what happens when the US may increase its interest levels first and the Eurozone then actually needs to follow. This will trigger quite some effects on each individual member state, especially with a view to the so-called Club Med. So what I could see or expect is that instead of steadily trying, as you said, to limit for example, the EZB bond purchase program, the EZB may be forced to apply just the contrary strategy in order to stabilize the Eurozone.
Alternatively, inflation might steadily increase in order to solve the problem, which equals to a creeping disappropriation. The risk of a long COVID phenomenon is multiple, also for corporates. Inflation might be here to stay, driven by such expectations. Many companies already feel the pressure of increasing input prices and shortages right now. And social imbalances might also increase and endanger political stability as one of the major pillars of long-term planning ability. What does a sustainable business mean to you if you try to visualize this 5 or 10 years into the future?
That would mean definitely lower leverage than today. Well, if you think about it, up to 1/3 of all companies are estimated not to earn their interest burden operationally if interest levels were to go up for just 1.5%. It would also mean a willingness to take into consideration that especially financial institutions they do not want to finance any kind of business model anymore. So just a few examples. For example, fulfillment of ESG criteria, that becomes more and more important, or green energy, zero emission. Consumers, for example, they will continue to want low prices, that especially in times of recession. And firms won't simply be able to charge more just because they manufacture in higher cost home countries. So the competition will ensure this. In addition, the pressure to operate efficiently and to use capital and manufacturing capacity frugally will remain unrelenting. With that, the change for companies will be to make their supply chains more resilient without at the same time weakening their competitiveness.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for the exciting conversation we had today. I hope to see you soon again. And in the meantime, thanks again. Take care and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.